Welcome to this episode of the Biology of Trauma podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Aimie. Does trauma create a pre-existing state that sets the stage for chronic pain after an injury? In this episode, we will be talking about chronic pain as a message from our body, part of an unconscious protective response learned by nerve pathways rather than the actual physical abnormality. While chronic pain can be traced back to an injury or event, the science actually suggests that chronic pain is caused by our brain's attempt to protect us from unbearable emotions. In fact, this purpose of protection is at the root of many complaints, including back pain, neck pain, sciatica, migraines, fibromyalgia, and many other symptoms. I have an incredible guest for this episode, Georgie Odlfield, a physiotherapist and chronic pain specialist who has been a real leader in the space. Georgie is a TEDx speaker and author of Chronic Pain, Your Key to Recovery. She is a woman, steady and strong in her leadership in trauma-informed care for chronic pain. I'm so thrilled to have her as the guest for this interview. I first came across her work when I sought out training in psychosomatic medicine while in preventive medicine residency. I had just switched out of general surgery and knew that I wanted to lean in more into the root cause of conditions that I had only previously been taught how to treat with a pill or surgery. This is how I came across these leaders in this psychosomatic space and have been happy to see Georgie provide such value and community for those with chronic pain and practitioners who work with those with chronic pain. In this episode, you will learn how chronic, ongoing, or recurring symptoms can actually be neuroplastic mind-body symptoms, how to ask questions that will help you get to the root of the message behind the symptom, why someone is more likely to develop chronic pain after having an acute injury, and the predisposing factors for this, how chronic pain can be the body's protective response to keep us from falling apart emotionally, and finally, how to communicate with your body and not just hear the messages, but also understand and know how to respond. I'm so very excited for this episode, and let's get started. Georgie, we've got an important conversation to have today because people need hope.
Okay. Definitely.
People need hope.
That's one of the big things, I think, for any of us, that we need hope. And that's why it's often useful for people to hear about recovery stories as well, because then they have hope.
So what was the turning point for you to no longer see chronic pain as a physical abnormality that didn't give hope because we can't fix that physical abnormality? What was that for you that you said, no, there's something different?
I became more and more interested in treating chronic pain, and just really getting frustrated by the lack of resources that we had, lack of treatments. I ended up learning acupuncture, reflex therapy for spinal pain, and it helped, but more with the acute issues rather than persistent or recurring symptoms. And I think it was, for me, leaving the National Health Service did play a part, and that was really because it gave me longer with clients. I got to know them better. And I could see that that was having a difference. And as you know from studies now, that when people take longer, when doctors take longer with clients then and really are empathic, then they get better results, surprisingly not. So it was when I'd started working in my own clinic, and I then began to, because I was giving people longer and had more time to just question things, I began to question a number of anomalies, like why people who were stiff and well normally came to me with back pain, having bent over to pick up a pen, or got out of bed, or woke up in the morning with sciatica, which I did as well, by the way. And I'll come back to that. But really developing pain that maybe they told me 5 years down the line, oh, I know what started it. I just got out of bed. It must have been the mattress. And you think, how many months and years have you been living with that mattress or that pillow? And I have to admit that I was one of those, I didn't have chronic ongoing pain, but I had lots of recurring symptoms that I now see as neuroplastic mind body symptoms. And after leaving the National Health Service and setting up my own private practice, I woke up one morning with severe sciatica, and for 3 weeks, my children were putting my shoes and socks on. And that was a turning point for me, because although I'd been questioning and I'd been reading and researching and trying to find an answer to all this, I wasn't getting anywhere. And then I came across a lady who had been recommended, who does craniofacial therapy. And with somato-emotional release, that's important. So a real understanding of the somatic side of things, which I know everybody understands here. And I asked if I could refer a client to her and sit in on the session, because I'd been working with this lady who basically had all over body pain, but worse down the left-hand side. It didn't fit any diagnostic pattern, didn't make sense. I told her at the start, I'm not sure if I can help, but I used a form of Bowen therapy, so I'd already moved into more complementary therapies. And I sat and in pain with my sciatica, by the way, I sat and watched this treatment. And she asked a question that I had never asked anybody, and I had never heard from anybody, which was, so what was going on in your life in the lead up to pain coming on? Which, of course, we should all be asking clients. And this lady has said that her husband had died. And not a few months after that, she started getting pain down her left side. Now, this lady just didn't go back. She didn't get it. Whereas I'm going, oh my goodness, that makes so much sense. And then I booked in and saw her myself, and then really connected with the fact that, I'd left my monthly salary. I'd been in the National Health Service for about 20 years. I was setting up my own business. My husband's self-employed. So there were lots of sort of concerns, but I was fine. I was absolutely fine. And really just stuffing it down. But I was breathing erratically. I clearly was stressed, but I just hadn't acknowledged it. They didn't know how to acknowledge it. And so that development of the sciatica and then it going away within 2 or 3 sessions of connecting it with the emotions and what was going on in my life, that was the main turning point. And I even went to this lady with another colleague to ask her to show us what she does and, learn more. Didn't get me any further unless I wanted to really go into years of training to be a craniofacial therapist and somato-emotional release, which I didn't really want to at that point. But then it was after that, after really questioning everything, then I actually just by chance came across Dr. John Sarno's book, one of his books, his earlier books. And I read that book and I was halfway through it and I woke up one morning and I couldn't move my neck. And because I knew that I hadn't injured it on my pillow, I knew why I had pain, but I hadn't got to the point in the book that told me what to do about it. And actually, I was going for an annual family get-together, a big family get-together. And interestingly, I couldn't read the book, but about 3, we were all together. And this time it was only actually for a few days we were all together. And then after 3 days, everybody left. And I was left with my parents, my daughter and 2 nieces, all of whom listened to me. Because I tend to be the quiet one in the family. I'm not confrontational. And so I tend to just, you go back into your family unit the way you behave normally, don't you? And I was bottling it up. And within half an hour of everybody going, the pain is gone. So if I ever needed reassurance like that, was something like aha moment. That's what it was. And from that point on, she's like, I've got to find out more. I've got to learn more, reading everything, contacting Dr. Sarno, visiting him. So that was the change for me.
I want to highlight something that you've said, Georgie, 2 things, because I think this is what makes you different. And now I understand why I have respected you so much. You learned to ask better questions.
Definitely.
And then you are still learning. You love to learn. Mm-hmm. So rather than just handing a client off to someone else, you're like, and can I come and watch the session? Because I want to learn. And those are 2 qualities that are not found in everyone. And that explains a lot for why you've then been able to develop and create the programs that you've had. So coming back to that first point, you ask different questions. Other people may be asking, well, what did you do? Did you move wrong? Did you exercise too much? Is it the mattress that you need to replace? And you've learned to ask better questions. Tell us more about that process of asking better questions and how you can encourage other people and even teach other people to ask better questions than what they might be asking right now about chronic pain.
I think just as it is with clients, the public, it's about education. So helping people if we're teaching practitioners, they need to understand why we're asking these questions. And from that, so what questions do we ask? And I think one of the most important is what was going on in your life in the lead up to when the pain came on. And really listening. I think, and the other thing that was a big change for me, Aimie, was learning to stop and listen. I'm a physiotherapist. I'm like, hands on, get going, act, treat them, get them better. And this was a complete turnaround of actually stopping and getting and listening to them, and sometimes and observing more. And that was a big lesson to learn, because I was too quick to get in and teach them something. Whereas actually it's better to let them talk and to help them make the connections as well. So I think that, and then one of the challenging ones is obviously, as you know, have they experienced any trauma? But it might be that we just say, did you have any challenges growing up? Rather than, just going into talk. And people think, they say, well, I haven't had trauma. And as you know, it's not just the big T traumas. There's so many. I don't think anybody, we both adore Gabamati. I don't think anybody has gone through life without having some sort of minor T's. I haven't. Well, do you know what I say? I haven't had any big traumas, and I used to think that because it didn't fit neatly with the ACEs scores. But I was sent to boarding school, so now I can see that was the huge trauma. It was taking me away from my caregivers. So it sometimes, as we know, we've both been over Gabor when he talks to people about helping them recognize that maybe their childhood wasn't quite as rosy as they thought. and quite often that is the case. And it's just sort of accepting that, they haven't had any big traumas, but then talking to them about their personality, about their learned behaviors, and then from that, helping them understand why they might have developed those personality traits, those behaviors.
That's so good. And I want to ask an important question now that is going to be on the minds of many people. But Georgie, I did have an accident. I had a car accident. I had a horse accident. I had something that messed up my neck, and it's never been the same since then. And you're now telling me that it's not actually from that accident. So does the overwhelm and the experiences of feeling all alone, which would be another way to describe trauma, did those experiences almost create a pre-existing state in our nervous system that then when the accident or the event happened, that the stage was set for it to move into chronic pain coming out of that?
Absolutely. You're the one that's the expert in the trauma, the biology of trauma. But there are absolutely predisposing factors and why somebody is more likely to develop chronic pain after having an acute injury. I was one of those. I fell off a horse. You mentioned it. I was thrown off a horse, concussed, had neck injury, was treated, made worse. And I always thought I had a problem with my neck. I always thought I had so many issues with my legs and had insoles and all sorts. I don't have any of that anymore. The body heals, tissues heal, and there are lots of factors as to why pain might persist. And one of them is personality. In fact, I don't know if you know the study that was done on a placebo car crash where they looked at personality traits of people. You aware of that one? So basically they did this placebo car crash, and before they did that, they presumably used it students. They're usually the ones that would put themselves up for something like this. And they did a personality profile test on them. And then they actually gave it wasn't built, but they did sort of build a proper car, didn't they? But they did just like a placebo, sort of shot them forward. But there was absolutely no way any tissue damage could have occurred. And yet I think it was immediately after about 20% of them had chronic pain, had pain, acute pain. And months later, 10% still they had pain. So that's becoming more chronic. But what's interesting is that they were able to predict who was going to have pain a month later with a 92% accuracy. 92. I still find that so amazing that they can be so accurate from personality traits. Unless you really start to consider why certain personality traits might cause that to happen. When we're being so, overly critical of ourselves or perfectionistic, really perfectionistic, need everything to be right, need to be in control, over analytical. And, that often is the case when we see people as they're over analyzing, they're really overthinking everything. And the amount of stress that causes is huge. So it's no wonder that our personality traits can predict if somebody has chronic pain. Lack of hope for the future. So if there's no hope for the future, if they have these beliefs that pain will always be there, so other negative beliefs about pain, if they were anxious at the time of the injury, if they were depressed at the time of injuries, all these are relevant and all the evidence is there. And yet how many medical people will actually look into this when somebody, because you can prevent that. If you know what causes pain to persist after an actual injury, because tissues will heal. If they've not healed after about 3 months, then we know the factors that cause pain to persist. So if we could go into those earlier and educate people, then less people would end up with chronic pain.
It allows us to be more intentional about how we're treating the pain.
Yes. Yeah.
I love that. So from your perspective then, Georgie, pain seems to have a purpose.
Yeah.
How would you describe the purpose of pain?
As a protective response. So the evidence now shows that pain is not just a sensation. It's not just you stub your toe and the nerves go up and say, oh, there's pain. It's impacted by a load of things. It's a perception rather than a sensation. But it's a protective response. So, for example, if you break your leg, usually, I struggle with this one now, this example, because usually you would have pain when you break your leg. Agreed? However, my son broke his patella, and then he broke his leg, kite surfing. He didn't know he'd broken his leg until he tried to get back on the board and his knee gave way. Even then, he had no pain. He just couldn't put weight through it. And he just thought, everybody ends up with knee problems with kite surfing. So somebody put him in a taxi to go to A&E, and then the taxi driver expected him to get help, but he couldn't walk. Anyway, long story short, he had no pain at all. And after the surgery, because he had to have surgery, after it was pinned, he only really had pain worth talking about when he took the strong painkillers, when he was worrying about the new job because he hadn't yet signed a contract. Even though he was demonstrating, he's in outdoor activities anyway, water sports, and he was demonstrating board. So when he was getting wound up or worried that he lost his motivation, and I kept trying to say to him, that's part of the healing response. You will have no motivation. You will be tired because it's your body protecting you from just getting out there and carrying on. So back to if you break your leg, although my son didn't have pain, usually you'd have pain. Then when you have a plaster cast put on, within a couple of days, 2 or 3 days, the pain goes. The bone hasn't healed, but the pain isn't required because it's being protected already. And I'm sure Howard Chibnall would have told you about the nail in the boot and, the fact that this guy was in agony. And yet when the boot came off, the nail was between the toes, not in the tissues. So it's a perception. Pain is a perception, and it can be impacted by past experiences, whether that be trauma or just a past experience, and our beliefs. If you believe, like the guy with the nail in the boot, if he believes that the foot is damaged, he'll be worrying about work and his family and etc. And that in itself can cause pain. And pain also can be a protective response from falling apart emotionally. From, if you've grown up learning that showing anger is dangerous because you saw it from your dad, or you were beaten if you showed anger, then if you're triggered to feel anger, then the likelihood is you've learned to just shut that down. And then therefore that can manifest as a symptom, which might be pain. It might be numerous other things as well.
That's the wisdom of the body that I'm hearing you talk about. The wisdom of the body says, when you don't know how to use your words or can't use your words, yes, I'll communicate it for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you don't listen when I'm whispering, I'm going to end up shouting at you, which is when your life just comes to a stop, doesn't it? It can come to an absolute stop, and it can be literally just that we're not listening. There's no somatic awareness. And quite often that is the case because so many people are in their heads overthinking all the time.
And so as we look at a lot of symptoms, it seems like chronic pain would be very similar to the other symptoms that can be protective, like fatigue. Fatigue can be a protective response to, you're doing too much, we're falling out of control, and we've got to sit down. You're not listening to me. I've been trying to talk to you. So clearly this is what I need to do to protect you, to protect us, is take away your energy so that you have to slow down.
Yeah. And basically our practitioners will treat all sorts from, dizziness and bladder problems, and every system in the body, as we know, can manifest symptoms. And if the nerves can create a symptom, then our minds can as well.
What other symptoms do you see commonly associated with chronic pain?
Tinnitus, definitely tinnitus, sinusitis, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, which is a chronic pain condition in itself. Bowel problems, that's a biggie. I think that's a very common one. And basically any, sexual issues, vaginismus, vulvodynia. I worked with somebody who had penile pain, and that actually ended up, thankfully, he was Scandinavian, because he was a lot more open than Englishmen, and we were able to have some fun in using visualization, for example, to imagine making love without having to wear a condom. And it was wonderful. And when I had an email saying that his wife was pregnant, that was the icing on the cake.
I think of the times in my life where I've developed chronic pain, and every single time there was something major going on in my life, something that was happening that was triggering one of my attachment insecurities. And I was not aware of it at the time. And I am so thankful that I learned to not chase after the symptom, but be able to ask the question of what's going on in my life that's making me feel insecure. But you talk about something that I want to bring into the conversation around this because it's very relevant. It's called predictive coding.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about predictive coding in relationship to pain and its messages.
Well, it's really about brain function. So it's really about the brain predicting what's going on minute by minute, because it saves energy. It makes things easier. If we've already learned something, we don't have to use that energy and time to relearn it. And I thought about an example, not a pain example, but a predictive coding example recently of, those videos you see, maybe somebody's been on one of these. I haven't and don't want to. But one of those glass bridges, where you have a bridge that goes over a canyon and it's just glass. Now, most people, when they go on one, I wouldn't go on one, but most people, when they go on one, their predictive coding has learned that this is dangerous because it doesn't really, it's not something it's used to. So it's not used to the bridge. All it can see is what's below the bridge and the danger and falling. And so that's why you find some people on these videos that are literally lying, crawling to get to the end. And it's about relearning, the brain has predicted that. I don't know if you've seen other things where there are songs and people put different words to the songs. And once you've heard that, you can't hear anything else. Again, it's predicted. You're picking it up like that. And the same thing can happen with pain and with anything else. If you, it could be something you've eaten, if you have learned, maybe you were really stressed when you ate, tomatoes, picked the wrong vegetable, ended dying. And maybe you were ill. Something was going on and you became ill. But down the line, your brain has linked that tomato, with that illness, and it will trigger that again. With there being danger, it will trigger it again. For many people, it can be, for, let's say, back pain. There's the general myth that bending is bad for your back. It's not bad for your back at all. Or that lifting's bad for your back. It's not bad for your back. And actually, with all the lifting and handling, trainings that go on in all the businesses, there's never been any evidence that it actually reduces the rate of back pain. And yet they still, have to do them. So there is still this myth that bending and lifting is bad for your back. So if we have that belief, and maybe we are stressed at some point and we bend over to pick up a pen, but it happens to be we're rushing and there's something else that's a problem, then you'll probably get back pain. And it might calm down, but later on, if you do a similar thing, then that again, the brain will predict, it's dangerous when you bend over. So it can just automatically, you end up with pain, and often even when you just think about bending. And that's a really good way of actually seeing if somebody has a neuroplastic condition, is if they just imagine it or think about it, then often the pain will come on.
Reminds me of Stephen Porges and what he talks about with the polyvagal theory and bringing it down to this concept of neuroception, which is what you're talking about. It's the perception of our nervous system, perception, not reality, the perception. And it's based on two simple things: my perception of danger versus my perception of safety. What cues of danger are coming into my nervous system versus what cues of safety are coming into my nervous system. And Georgie, in the world that we live in today, there are very few cues of safety that we get. We have to create those. And unless we know to create those, all we get are cues of danger, subconsciously. And no wonder our nervous system is then reacting to everything from that place of danger and creating pain as a message of, I feel like I'm in danger and I need to protect you. Georgie, you are talking about a beautiful relationship that you have formed with your body. And you've said the word a couple times now where go within. I go within, go within. And I know that is not who you used to be. That is not who I used to be. I used to go to my head, right? Like go to my head, go to my head.
Yes, all the time.
All the time. And so, you have these acronyms, which are very helpful, that starts with the pause, right? And yet what I really want to help people see is how you talk to your body, the relationship that you have developed where you know that even though your knee popped back into place, you told your body you were going to take care of it. And you need to follow through on that, because if you don't, that's going to break trust that your body has in you. And that's going to disconnect that connection and that relationship. So within the larger picture of that go within, it's also creating this beautiful communication and relationship that you've developed with your body.
Yeah, with my body, and I consider it like my inner child. So I really, the IFS side, I might work with different parts, but predominantly I was talking to my younger self, the vulnerable, even if it was the younger self from 5 minutes ago, the vulnerable younger self. I also very surreptitiously was just sort of stroking my arms when I was at the side of the tennis courts, because that again is self-soothing, and the butterfly hug. So anything like that I can do, then I will do. And I do work with my inner child. And again, no, I never did anything like this. Never, always in my head. And it's still a journey, isn't it, though? And I say this to clients, don't just, this is not get better, now get off and do what you were doing before. Or people who say, oh, I wish I was like I was before. Really? Because that's why you're in this situation you're in. So I feel like I'm constantly on this ongoing journey. I still make mistakes. I still go into my head, and then, I'm learning all the time and practicing different things. And yeah, because it's fascinating about anything else.
I remember when I first connected my inner child with a pain that I would develop when I was biking. And I love to road bike. It's actually been my safe place when home was not my safe place. So there's a lot of emotional association with my bike and being out there on the road. And I would start to develop this pain on the outside of my knee. And of course, being trained in conventional medicine, my first thought had always been, oh, it's that fascia, right? Like my fascia is getting tight.
I went through all that.
And then one day, after doing enough of this work, that I knew to ask a better question, Georgie. And I still remember the first time that I asked it, and the result was amazing to me. I know it won't be amazing to you because this is what you do.
Always amazing.
It's always amazing. And I got that pain, and I was 25 miles into a ride. Why now? Right? I've been riding for 25 miles. There's no reason for right now, except that about 25 miles into a ride is when I really start to settle into the ride. And all of my superficial anxieties have now been discharged and dissipated. And now that's when I really start to feel myself dropping in. And I would develop this pain. And for the first time, I asked, what are you trying to tell me? What message do you have for me? I didn't get anything back. And then I asked a specific question. What are you feeling scared about? Oh, and immediately the thought came to mind of something specific in my life at that time that I was scared. I was scared. I felt very insecure. Didn't know what to do. Didn't know how it was going to turn out. And as soon as I got that message, the pain went away.
Yeah.
And I was fascinated by this ability to communicate with parts of me, my young, insecure part, through my pain as it showed up in my body. And that, like you're saying, it really did have a purpose. It really did have a message. And I had never known how to access the message, which for me comes back to the relationship that you've described that you have with your body now. And really what seems to be the solution for this type of pain and its messages is develop the relationship that it can communicate with you in many ways, and that you're not pressuring it to communicate with you. You're able to give it that space that says, I understand me right now. But it's the relationship that I am just so struck by how you're describing that so beautifully, that I would want people to really get out of this talk.
Absolutely. And learning to let go, not just of whatever's happening around us, but we talk about letting go or surrendering to the pain. And a lot of people don't understand that because they feel like if you're surrendering to the pain's going to attack you. But the aim of surrender is that you put your white flag up and people back off. And recently I heard somebody calling it, let it be. So if you don't understand the letting go or surrender, letting it be, letting someone else be who they are, rather than getting upset about who they are, what they've done. Maybe they don't live a life that you feel that they should be living, or if we let the pain be, then we're actually reducing the resistance created by being hypervigilant and using all our crutches and trying hard to get rid of it. And, all these things that just actually create more self-induced stress, which then fuels the pain.
Well, Georgie, thank you. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for your stories. Thank you for sharing your experiences and what you've learned along the way. I really, really honor the path that you've gone on in order to learn this and to share this.
Thank you, Aimie. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really do appreciate it. I really do. And I really value your work as well.